What's happening, good people? Hey, today I want to talk about dreams and how we can distinguish your random night's dream or even nightmare as opposed to stuff that might give you some sort of information of future events or something personal that you can use and help you downstream. Um, yeah, it's a tricky subject. Some people claim that they can get or ask about information and dream it that night and really help them out. Some people say they can predict the future with the dreams. I don't know. I don't know where I land on that side of the fence or not. But I've been a prolific dreamer my whole life. I've remembered almost all the content of my dreams. The ones that are meaningful and powerful, I will have written down and archived over the years. Maybe that kind of helps train, um, the ability to recall all that content. But I certainly believe they're valuable. But that also, just because you have a powerful dream doesn't mean it's a one-to-one relationship between reality. If you dream this, then this is going to happen. That's not quite the case, right? We all know that. I've had some pretty amazing dreams that were um, spot on, high def, a red alert color around the edges, giving me specific information about a specific event that was not just lucky or happenstance. I think one of them was the large earthquake in Chile. I nailed it to a T. It was a 8.3, 8.2, I can't remember, in Chile, and those don't grow on trees, right? Those don't happen every year. But I nailed it, the location and the size. So, although I do believe you can get some sort of future event, again, I'm always wary about making a direct correlation because many times it just doesn't turn out that way. That being said, what is the purpose on some of those what I call high definition dreams if they're not meant to relay a message, right? Why? Why be shown some of these things? I'm going to give you an example. All right, I'm going to give you three examples. I'm going to read them. They're not very long. I hate reading dreams. It's so terrible. I'll do my best not to, but these dreams were a perfect example of high definition dreaming. I mean, it's like you're watching an IMAX 3D film, even better. The emotions, the feelings, the storybook, the narrative, the narration, the post dream but haven't woken yet analysis and review of the content of the dreams were all there. And even more interesting in this particular example was that these were all the same installment of dreams. They were just like that, an installment, like a sequels. Okay, they were like a one, two, three. Each one carrying off from where the last one left. Three snapshots of a future event or a possible future event. Obviously, I don't know. However, now that we're getting closer and closer to some crazy stuff in the world, I figured it's time to share these and see what you people think. Um, okay, I labeled these life at the start of the crash, life during the collapse, and hunger after the collapse. All right. Three phases of what life will look like when things start changing from normal to very destructive and disturbing reality. Okay, so the first one was called Life at the Start of the Crash. And it went like this. I was living in a row house in an urban city, which I believe was like a Baltimore type of area. I was on the end of a row house string, the end of house, and I was in the middle of remodeling it when the events of the crash started picking up speed. Society hadn't quite fallen completely at this time, but the winds of change were blowing fast. Many people were streaming by the roadhouse, and many were very desperate. Black, white, Mexican, white, you name it. Many began to try and pour into my local or my hobby area, my lobby area, and beg for food, for work, for anything at all. When the crowd gathered, I immediately began to shout at them to get out of there. I told them to get back because I was scared. One of the younger kids screamed back at me that they have no choice. They are starving out here, for God's sakes. and his face and his voice were 20 notches above mine, full of power and desperation. It shocked me to the core, and I gave the crowd a breakfast sandwich I had in my hand. It was then that I realized that, number one, things had changed, and starving homeless people weren't just annoyances anymore, right? That a homeless guy begging for food or change. And number two, that I had to leave as soon as possible, as there was no way I could defend myself against the hordes of starving people who were going to rip me and my house apart for any scrap of food to eat. It was a very stark realization of what things really would be like when shit hit the fan. Okay, that was the very first installment. I mean, this was very powerful. I remember that boy's voice, how strong, how desperate it was. I mean, when I say shook me to my core, that's the best way I could describe it in words. But it went much deeper than that. I was horrified. I woke up really, really affected by this dream. It was more to it, obviously, than just these words, but this is like kind of a snapshot. A few months later, I had a second installment of this series, and I titled it "Life During the Collapse." Um, so, well, this stream this time it was took place in a full blown crash. Right. It began with me walking through an old neighborhood of mine that was rough and tough. But as I walked through, I noted that it seemed harsher and darker, and everyone walked around in groups, some small, some larger groups. The large ones, they even had some form of uniform or dress code to them. I was a bit nervous, but being toughened by the hard lessons of my youth, I puffed out my chest, put on my hard face, and moved through the crowds. As I made my way through the alleyways and buildings, I passed an older man that was familiar to me. This guy was like the richest guy I knew in my current life, right? And I was passing through what was his store, I guess. And it was like an old jewelry pawn type store. Dusty. There's trash laying around. And he seemed to be missing some teeth and a lot worse for the wear. But I asked him if I could go through his shop and take a shortcut, and he waved me through. The shop looked terrible. Yeah, it was all out of sorts, but yet he was doing business in there anyway. So I continued on to my destination, and which was an old like auto parts type store, like a auto zone, and it was converted into a large house or hangout. Many questionable characters were there. Three of them were my friends, and I couldn't figure out why my friends were even there. I mean, they seemed to be on drugs and didn't mind the fact that they were hanging out in a situation that seemed like at any second that we were going to be turned on and robbed of everything we had, because these people had nothing. It was like a communal hangout where people just cooked some food, did some drugs, and just hung out or lived, I guess. I kept trying to get my friends to leave because I knew things weren't going to stay friendly for long, but they wouldn't move. Worse yet, I really didn't know where I was. I was a little lost. Anyway, some people showed me their guns and kind of threatened me, but I got the sense nobody really used them. And then at the end of the dream, my higher brain kicked in, and I started analyzing the dream. I realized this wasn't a bad neighborhood at all. It was every neighborhood. And those people that traveled in groups, they did this so for safety. They even had uniforms as a show of strength and organization, maybe even community support groups, right? They weren't gangs just trying to rob people. And the reason why there wasn't a lot of killings was because no one had any bullets left. They were just the guns they had to show off and use as a show for intimidation. And the former rich guy that I knew in my current life, he was still rich, but just not compared to where he was now. Right? He was just a pawn shop scrap dealer. Very scary dream, but scary for the reality of a bleak future. So that started ratcheting things up a notch. This installment, it really started kind of worrying me what the hell I was being shown. And then it took it to a next and final level where it really sunk in that something lay on the other side of our perfect reality that we currently lived in. And this is called hunger after the collapse. All right. In this dream involved me walking around with some people in a city somewhere in the United States. It felt like New York, kind of like a big park area amongst buildings. So like Central Park type of place. Many people were funneling through this thoroughfare of sorts, and my group mixed with another group of people. And we stopped and started talking to one another. I was watching this dialogue between several people from a third person perspective, but I did not feel like I was this person who's interacting with people. I was just kind of seeing this through his eyes. And as we start talking, one of them pointed to me and asked a question about food or something. I heard the reply as it came from my person. It said something about my stomach and the belt that I was wearing being a after an event belt, like after some sort of event, like after a Holocaust event. Not the Holocaust, but it was like something like that. It was a belt that meant something, and that I went through something, right? And this person looked down at me, and then I could see my stomach, and my stomach was caved in. It was totally shrunken down, so much so the belt had no more rungs left. I had to like carve a hole into the belt to make it fit, and to hold up these stained worn out cargo pants that I had on. Um, I know this is not very clear out, but what I was seeing in this dream was that this person, I was this an older Jewish man with a Brooklyn or a New York accent. The words are escaping me at this point, but the emotion or the gist of the conversation was very, very telling. When these people were talking to each other, this Jewish man was describing the state of hunger and the appearance of his belt as a symbol of the survival of societal or social collapse in the world, not just the United States, the whole world. He made a reference to Nazi Germany when he spoke about it, comparing it to the concentration camps or whatever he survived. It was akin to those that survived the Nazi Holocaust event. The stark way he related the information to the others so matter of factly that I knew that our world was completely changed and people were now simply in a mindset to survive with one another. No one was fighting. There was a thread that united these people to survive together, if that makes any sense. During this time, I could feel his hunger, and it manifested in me, and I could feel this hunger was with him for a long time. No expectations of a full stomach in the foreseeable future. They all survived on scraps. And that ended the third installment. So why? Why go through all this energy to somehow manifest in my dreams the a series of installments of dreams that showed the beginning, during, and after the collapse of society? I mean, I don't watch movies that revolve around this. There's nothing in my life that could point to this. Life was good. Still is relatively good, Um, but why show this to me? For me, it just doesn't make sense. Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere down the road in the near future, we find ourselves going through some of these stages in some way. Maybe the severity is a little lessened, maybe it's not. But it's something I wanted to share with you and see if anyone else out there has had this sort of high definition dream installment series forecasting or foreshadowing a much different world. God bless.